Right, thank you all for coming. It's a pleasure to see such a full group of people, a full lecture hall. My name is Toby Dodge, and I'm lucky enough to be the Kuwait Chair at the London School of Economics and Director of the Kuwait Programme. This is the annual Kuwaiti lecture that the Kuwait Programme runs, so we're very, very privileged to have Sultan Al Qassemi, who must be known, it's one of the few occasions I say a man who needs no introduction, but for those of you who may not know his full resume, Sultan is a United Arab Emirates columnist whose articles have appeared in the Financial Times, The Independent, The Guardian, The Huffington Post, New York Times, amongst many others. He's a prominent commentator on Arab affairs on Twitter, and rose to prominence, can we say, during the Arab Spring. His tweets became, I think, a major news source and a source of analysis after 2011 as we were all scrabbling to keep up. And we could say he probably outflanked the major news networks. Sultan is an MIT Media Labs Directors Fellow, and in 2014, Arabian Business placed him as one of the world's most 100 powerful Arabs in the thinking category. So he's also the founder of Bajil Art Foundation, an independent initiative established to contribute to the intellectual development of the art scene in the Arab region. And if you haven't seen the exhibition that he's curating at the Whitechapel Gallery, I would insist you go along in the next few days because it's going to close on Friday, I think that's right. So Sultan will talk for about 45, 50 minutes. We'll then have questions and answer for about half an hour. And then you're all invited to join a reception in the senior common room that you'll be directed to afterwards if you want to join us for refreshments and to carry on the discussion. Sultan, please take your place.
Thank you. Testing. I'm just trying to time myself. Thank you, everybody, for showing up. My name is Sultan Sooud Al Qassemi. I'm here to tell you a little bit about the history of politics in modern and then contemporary art in the Arab world. So in 1937, there was an exhibition in Munich that the National Socialist Party in Germany put together. The exhibition was titled, so-called, Degenerate Art. The exhibition brought together very famous, some of the most important and famous artists of the 20th century, but they were seen as being un-German, immoral. Some names that you would recognize, these artists are now respected. However, in those days, they were being lumped up together and criticized by the German government. The reverberations of this exhibition, 1937, went as far as North America, Europe, and in the Middle East. So you had Leon Trotsky, you had André Breton, you had Diego Rivera come out with statements sort of denouncing what happened in this so-called degenerate art exhibition. Well, something similar happened in the Arab world as well. In Cairo, a group of professors, intellectuals, artists came together to found a group known as Jama'at al-Fan wal-Hurriya, or the Arts and Freedom Group. These intellectuals and artists issued a periodical. The periodical was called Evolution, and this is their manifesto that they issued in 1938. So they were saying things like, let us take up the challenge together. Europe is being overtaken by a new wave of Middle Ages, and it is idiocy and folly to reduce art into a particular religion, race, or a nation. So very, very political statement by artists and intellectuals in Egypt. But just look at the name here. This encompassed people who were Muslim, Jewish, Christian. Some names are perhaps recognizable to you, and they came together and issued this declaration in 1938. Their art was also perhaps categorized as so-called degenerate. This is a piece by Samir Rafi', Ramses Yunan, and Inji Aflatun, who was one of the youngest members of this group. There is a resurrection that has been taking place in the study of Arts and Freedom Group, including an exhibition that opened last month in Cairo put together by the Sharjah Art Foundation, and there's one opening tomorrow in the Pompidou. However, Arab artists have depicted political events since the early 20th century. This is a work from Palestine from 1918 by Nicolas Saïch, depicting the surrender of Jerusalem to the British. There's also artists like Inji Aflatun who depicted events in the 1940s that took place decades before. So this is a very famous massacre called Din Shaweh, in which, is there, oh, I love that there is a laser point. So do you see the helmets of the soldiers, the occupying soldiers, looking as though as this person is being hanged, and you see the family pleading for his life, depicting a massacre from 1906. Not all artists had an antagonistic relationship with the government. Many of them were very friendly with the government, such as George Sabbagh, who in this piece called The Sycamore Trees of Cairo, gives this work to His Majesty King Fuad I of Egypt. So these artists enjoyed royal patronage. But some of them, like Abdel Hadi al-Gazzar, didn't. Now, this artist was thrown in jail because of this artwork. I'll give you a few seconds to guess why. Does anybody want to hazard a guess? Why do you think this artist was thrown in jail? Naked women? Wrong. You want to try again? Sorry? No. One more guess? Empty. Who said empty plates? Yes, yes, very right. So the empty plates, the message of this artwork was so controversial. The fact is that Yusuf Amin, who was a founder of a school of art in Egypt, invited Abdel Hadi al-Gazzar and told him, we're going to present a work to His Majesty. Would you like to give a work? And he gave this work, and it was so offensive to the royal household that he was thrown in jail. And as you said, it's because it depicts hunger in Egypt, which is one of the names of this artwork. So the message is, everyone is hungry in your kingdom, Your Majesty. And so this artist was very happy, as you can see, with this artwork when the government in Egypt was overthrown and a republic took over. So this work from 1962 is called Al-Mithaq, or the Charter, and it's in the National Museum in Egypt. And it depicts here the charter that was written by Abdel Nasser government, but it also shows you here in the back, I don't know if you can see this, a Muslim imam and a priest hugging, sort of shows you cross-sectarian unity in Egypt, the development, the industrialization, the stork. Do you see this, the wheat and the flour in the hands of the farmers? So it's very political, very pro-government as well. So one of the reasons that there was a national identity that emerged in the mid-20th century is because of the fine art societies that started across the Arab world. So from the early 50s in Baghdad, you had art societies in Kuwait, in Khartoum, in Casablanca. Across the Arab world, artists came together. And it wasn't just artists who came together, but artists and intellectuals, professors. And there was an exchange and a flow of ideas between them. And so you saw the emergence of nationalism, pan-Arabism. Even under the monarchy, people were exchanging ideas with each other. This is another photo of the Baghdad Fine Art Society. A lot of these people, by the way, were not artists. Some of them were intellectuals like Jabra Ibrahim Jabra from Palestine, who was associated with them. This work from 1957, again celebrating Iraq, moving away from the likes of George Hanna Sabbagh. You saw the work that he gave to the king, how European it looked, like a landscape could have been painted by any European artist. But here you see, again, the emergence of national identity, symbols, whether it's the pigeon of peace, the olive branch. However, some artists, like Kadhim Haidar, were very concerned with the repression that was taking place in Iraq in 1957. So Nouri Saeed was the last prime minister of Iraq. Nouri Saeed was invited by the king to form a government, and he was known to suppress a lot of the opposition. And this artist, Kadhim Haidar, from Iraq, was very worried about this suppression, and he depicted it in this artwork. It shows a person who's boxed in, almost cramped into this artwork. He's almost too big for this artwork. If he stands up, you know, you need twice as big a canvas. But this is not really the message in this artwork. The message appears here. Do you see on the left, there's all these matchstick men and women? So this is where the messages are. You have soldiers shooting at civilians, and this truly did happen. 1956, 57 in Iraq, you had people protesting the Baghdad Pact of 1956. You had trials. You had political repression. Look at this again: civilians putting their hands up, afraid, tanks being rolled into the street. There's even a rape scene. So unless this person's trying to save the woman or resuscitate her, I'm not sure, but it kind of looks like he's not trying to save her life. So again, 1957, a very difficult year in Iraq. And this work is I think one of the most important works that we have in the collection. It's by Kazim Haidar. It's called The Martyr's Epic. So on the surface of this work, it depicts a religious event. So the religious event is the martyrdom of Imam Hussein bin Ali, 1,400 years ago or so. And again, it shows the soldiers or the companions who are with Imam Hussein mourning the Imam. The Imam is here sort of gone through this portal. They're crying for him. They're upset. The sun has gone red, perhaps a symbol of the blood that was shed in the Battle of Karbala. However, this work from 1965 depicts a major political event. And the political event was the overthrow of Abdel Karim Qasim's government. So Abdel Karim Qasim, first president of the Republic of Iraq, had overthrown the monarch, and then it was his turn. 1963, there were mass trials, there was confiscation of property, and there was also executions. So they say that upwards of 300 people were executed in that period, many of them intellectuals that this artist might have mixed with, might have communicated and befriended, whether it was in the arts society or elsewhere. So this is an allegory or a metaphor for the political events of 1963. You also see the emergence of public political art, like this work by Jawad Salim, which was created a couple of years after the overthrow of the monarchy. This work is called Monument to Freedom, freedom from the British influence in Iraq. This work is still in Baghdad, fortunately, although the artist never got to see it, by the way, because it was completed after he had passed away. But look at this work, Monument to Freedom, depicting a man sort of breaking through a cage and perhaps even freeing his compatriots. So very much political, very much public art that we see emerging for the first time. I suppose some of you recognize this work, Christ the Redeemer, in Rio de Janeiro, created by an artist known as Paul Landowski. This artist was Polish. He was invited by the French occupation government in Algeria to create a monument to celebrate, as you see, to not celebrate, but to commemorate the fallen French soldiers of the Great War, which ended 10 years before, 1928. As you see here, the horses sort of standing in a solemn position and respecting and sort of saluting almost the fallen French soldier. But what happened was that an artist, 50 years on, an artist was invited to change this monument and depict the fallen Algerian soldier who were victims, or the Algerian man or woman, who were victims of the French occupation. So rather than destroy the monument that you saw before you here, he decided, when he covered it up, he decided to enclose it in this sarcophagus. Again, look at this work with the two hands sort of breaking the chains, the freedom from the French government. But also, in a way, the message might be that Algeria is the tomb of the invader. But I love how he also didn't destroy another artist's artwork. He kept it, and it's still inside. I mean, here, this slide can show you how the work has been covered inside. This is an artwork by the same artist in which he is associating the Amazigh nation or the Amazigh people with the political events, the Front de Libération Nationale, the Organisation Armée Secrète of Algeria, these political developments and these political agents that were active in the 1950s and early 60s. Nationalism and nationalism and pan-Arabism were also a big feature of the 1950s and 60s. Here you see Ibrahim Ismail, a Kuwaiti artist, depicting Sheikh Abdullah Salem, the sort of founding father of modern Kuwait, who brought in the constitution to Kuwait, the dove of peace, once again, the olive branch. He is the person who introduced parliamentary elections into Kuwait, so very much celebrated. Another Kuwaiti artist called Khalif Al-Qattan, celebrating Gamal Abdel Nasser, but look how he's associating Abdel Nasser and the Egyptian flag sort of being the umbrella organization for the Arab world, from the Maghreb states all the way to the Gulf. Abdel Nasser is sort of this father figure to this region in North Africa. Not all artists were happy with Abdel Nasser. Some of them were unhappy, like communist activist Nji Aflatun, who was thrown in jail for a number of years. This is one of her work, which some of her best work was actually depicting the events that took place in jail, the people that she met in jail, like this artwork, Girl Behind Prison Wall, which she created in the 1950s. But most artists in general were very happy with Abdel Nasser, especially Hamid Ouais, continuously revisited Abdel Nasser and nationalism in his work. You see here Abdel Nasser larger than life, sort of looming over his people. Everybody celebrating around him, everyone smiling. The soldier, the fallah, the people came to celebrate the nationalization of the Suez Canal in 1957. And you see the ship here sort of crossing, and Abdel Nasser keeping his eye on the ship, celebrating. Again, this is another artwork which shows you Abdel Nasser larger than life by Muhammad Sabri, called The Peace Speech from 1960. Look how he has Abdel Nasser giving a talk at the United Nations, but also all his buddies are sitting in the front row, the president of Indonesia, the USSR, the American guy, of course. Then you have the king of Saudi, Fidel Castro, and of course, but notice how smart it is that he kept an empty seat for him, because his place is on the front seat. He wouldn't be coming from the back. So all the symbolism in these political artworks are amazing. Just look at this work where Abdel Nasser invited Arab leaders to sign a Cairo agreement in 1970. Notice something about Abdel Nasser? He's bigger than all of them, isn't he? So you have the Saudi king sort of on the corner there at the end, and he has the ones that he likes next to him. Okay, and look at the document that he's signing, and again associating him with Jerusalem once again, and the people that he would probably try to sort of overshadow in his life. So a lot of Arab governments politicized national events and national projects. One of the most politicized projects, it's an infrastructure project, was the High Dam of Egypt in Aswan. So there was a number of exhibitions that took place to bring the High Dam closer to the intellectual community of Cairo and Alexandria. Here, artists like Raghib Ayad were bussed into Aswan. Affat Naji is another, taken to Aswan to depict the building of the dam in the 1960s. But notice one thing about this artwork, by the way. What does it look like they're building? They look like they're building the pyramids, or maybe digging the Suez Canal. So in a way that the artist is associating Abdel Nasser with sort of being the successor to the pharaohs and the successor to the Khedewis. Also, one other thing about this artwork someone noted to me is the fact that it's the 1960s, but where is the machinery? So people are still working with their hands. It's 1964-65. So it might even have been a critical artwork. There was a lot of sympathy and solidarity between artists from across the Arab world with each other. Of course, we will come to the major theme that they were all concerned about. But in this artwork from 1960, you see Lebanese artist Arif al-Rayis gifting this work to the Algerian people. This work is in the Museum of the Museum des Beaux-Arts in Algeria. And I couldn't find the name of this work. I took a picture and I visited. Again, it depicts the Organisation Armée Secrète, which ruled Algeria on behalf of the French, the United Nations over here. For some reason, there's Nazism, there's Zionism, there's the EU, or not EU, but Europe, and all of them are trying to get a piece of the Algerian sort of. You see how these mechanical crocodiles cutting the leg off the Algerian, trying to cook him in a stew. So everybody wants a piece of the Algerian. So the work was very much political. Arif al-Rayis, Lebanon, 1960. One of the most, again, important nationalist works is this by Hamid Ouais, the same guy who did the nationalization of the Suez Canal with Abdel Nasser, with the people celebrating around him. But this work is so smart because it sort of depicts, first of all, it was created in 1967. Of course, what happened in 67 was the defeat of the Arab armies at the hands of Israel. But also there was a blow to the morale of the Arab armies. A lot of people were very upset. And yet here you have the guardian of life, the protector, the hero of Egypt, who's able to protect the Egyptians underneath him here, sort of like an umbrella where the cycle of life continues. People are getting married, children are going to school, scientists. But what's interesting about this work as well is that this piece is divided into two halves. On one half, you have prosperous Egypt. You have people standing on the square. You have workers coming from a factory. Look at the smoke billowing from the chimneys. What does that mean? It means that the production is continuing. Life is continuing. However, on the other side, he has his gaze on this barren land, this land that has been deserted. What is that land over there? That's probably the Suez Canal. That's probably Sinai. He has his eyes on it in case anybody tries to advance from there. But of course, it's occupied by Israel. The message is he's protecting the people, but this area is deserted, which is probably not exactly true. 1974, this artist revisits, following the demise of Abdel Nasser, revisits in this work called Al-Ubur, sort of the triumph against Israel. There was Hebrew words here, but we saw it through the X-rays, but it has been since painted over. Again, Al-Ubur celebrates one of the triumphs of the Egyptian army who were able to cross the canal. But this takes me to this show. The Egyptian government and many Arab governments politicized art for their own reasons. This is a rare poster of an exhibition that took place in Tel Aviv in the Habima National Theatre, 1982. As following the Camp David Accords, the Egyptian government agreed to do an exhibition of Egyptian art in Israel. This was the first and the last exhibition that I could find that took place in Tel Aviv. But they took the master, the father of the Egyptian modern art movement, Mahmoud Said, and a few months later, Israeli artists exhibited in a hotel in Cairo. But that was the first and the last time that this had ever taken place. Many artists were sort of shunned if they tried to show works with Israeli artists. But the major theme, the biggest theme that resonated across the Arab world, the biggest political theme was, of course, Palestine. This work from 1953, probably maybe the most important, or by the most important artist, or one of the most recognized artists, Ismail Shammout, from 1953, called Where To? Ila Ain. It depicts a group of Palestinian refugees, a father with his children perhaps, wearing tattered clothes, poor, wandering from village to village or place to place, really not knowing where to go. Palestine was revisited by artists from Palestine and from outside Palestine. This is a work by Naim Ismail called Fidaiyin from 1967, obviously referencing the Palestinian Kufi. Again, Abdel Hayy Musallam Zarara, once again showing you Palestinian women resisting the Israeli occupation in this work from Sharjah Art Foundation. This work by Marwan Qassab Bashi, a Syrian based in Berlin since the 1950s, shows you Palestinian children who were resisting the Israeli occupation as giants. Even if this work has this magic about it, even if it's placed on the ground, you still look up at the children. The message is that the Palestinian children resisting the Israeli occupation are giants, and you have to look up to them, and you, the viewer, are small compared to them. Abdel Qadir Rayis, Emirati artist, once again depicting Palestinian refugees, the theme of Palestine, a constant reminder in this work that I skipped over, 1989, despite the fact that Abdel Qadir Rayis did not paint a lot of figurative work. He revisits figurative painting in this work owned by the National Gallery in Jordan, depicting a Palestinian during the Intifada throwing stones. You can't see it here, but there are Israeli occupation forces here, soldiers in the background. And then you see the Palestinian flag over there. Moroccan artist Farid Belkahia depicting Jerusalem in 1994. Again, one of the most famous artworks is Sleiman Mansour, Camel of Burden from 1978, I believe, depicting Palestinian sort of carrying the burden of Jerusalem on his back. And maybe one of the most important artists, Ziya Azawi, who now has a major retrospective in Qatar's Mathaf, using a poem from Mahmoud Darwish called The Body's Anthem which begins أنا أحمد العربي فليأتي الحصار. I am Ahmad al-Arabi, let the siege come. So he is employing the poetry of Mahmoud Darwish in the artworks called Nasheed al-Jasad. Again, revisiting Najil Ali's Handala Dhiya Azawi, depicting the Palestinian child whose hands are behind his back, sort of showing you the helplessness that the child is just viewing the events but unable to do anything about them. And this, of course, work which was bought by the Tate Museum here in London a few years ago, depicting the massacre of Sabra and Shatila, often referred to as Dhiya Azawi's Guernica piece. Sabra and Shatila, again, shown by or depicted by Kuwaiti artist Sami Muhammad. This is an interesting exhibition that took place in 1978. Palestine is a theme that reverberates not only in the Arab world, but across the world. There was a call in the late 1970s for artists to donate works to Palestine. Artists from Europe, from North America, but I think many of them from the Middle East and the Arab world as well, gave works to the International Art Exhibition for Palestine, which took place in Lebanon in 1978. Although these works have all been missing. This is just a list of the artists that have shown in that exhibition. This is a work by Asim Abu Shaqra. Asim Abu Shaqra was one of the first Palestinians to study in an Israeli institution, an academic, an arts institution. But he associates the Palestinians, he uses the cactus plant as a symbol for Palestinians. So here he shows you the cactus plant, which is known for its perseverance, for its resistance, for its patience, sitting on a window overlooking Tel Aviv. And the idea is that even a Palestinian in Tel Aviv, basically himself, would not change would not shed his thorns. It wouldn't change. And of course, cactus in Arabic is what? Sabbar, and sabbar comes from the word sabr, which is patience. So there's layers and layers of political symbolism in this work. This is a work by Sleiman Mansour depicting sort of the divisions and of the West Bank, which I think he's almost anticipating the apartheid wall that would be built later on, because this work is built using cement. This is a great work by a contemporary artist, Khalid Jarrar, who went and chipped pieces from the apartheid wall in the West Bank and reconstituted it into a volleyball, in a way mocking the apartheid wall, but also reflecting the fact that children can no longer play with each other. The ball is now made of concrete. The Palestinian children cannot play. The villages have been divided. This is a work by Larissa Sansour, Palestinian artist based in Denmark, who was invited to take part in a arts competition, but in Switzerland. But when the sponsor found out that she was doing a work about Palestine, the sponsor said, "You know what? We don't want any political work from the Middle East." So the sponsor said, so the artist said, "This is my life. My life is all about politics." And so she was kicked out of the competition. But she continued the work nonetheless, and they were able to raise funds. So basically the idea of the work is that the Palestinians, the one solution to the Palestinians is to build a giant skyscraper in Jerusalem, and all the Palestinians would live in that skyscraper. Of course, this is fantasy, this is not a solution. But as you can see, she's standing in the lobby. Jerusalem is on one floor, Ramallah, Bethlehem, Nazareth, and each village has a floor. I'm going to play a small part of it coming up next. Here she is visiting her apartment overlooking Jerusalem and watering her olive tree in her apartment in this giant skyscraper. I hope the video works. It's about, I think, 30 seconds or so. So I'm going to show you some works that were created pre-Arab Spring. This work was a monument designed by an Italian artist, but then obviously it was destroyed during the Lebanese Civil War, 1975-1990. So you have here Mona Hatoum, a Beirut-born Palestinian artist living in the UK, almost freezing that work in time, the way it looked in 1990, the year the war ended, almost as a reminder of what devastation the Civil War has brought upon Lebanon, upon this artwork, but also upon society. Here you have an Iraqi artist called Afif Al-Aibi who depicted the bombing of Baghdad or in 1990-1991 war. But you also have, at the same time, Syria Al Qassemi depicting in this stencil No to the Occupation, which she created in 1990-1991 during the occupation of Kuwait. Here is the Joy of Liberation, a year after the liberation of Kuwait. Do you notice that the abaya of the woman is in the shape of the map of Kuwait? Okay, so this is an artist. I don't know why the work is so dark, but if you can see it over there, it depicts it's called Outside Bars, 2005, and it depicts a group of Egyptians standing in line with money in their hands, trying to buy bread. But as you can see, even though they have money, there's only 5 or 6 loaves of bread. It's not enough. So if you recall, Egypt had a number of riots to do with the lack of bread in the street. In this work by Walid Abeid called Under Arrest 2007, it shows you the torture of an Egyptian citizen at the hands of the security forces in the Mubarak era. Of course, some of you who follow Egypt would know that there was a famous YouTube video that was uncovered in those days showing you torture of a citizen. So this is once again by an artist depicting that such event. Bush was promising a lot of democracy in the Middle East. This is an artist called Huda Lutfi, almost mocking that promise, 2008. The work is called Democracy is Coming. It's the halo over Kulthum, but democracy is coming on the wings of military jets. Okay, this is an interesting work by Moroccan artist Mohsen Harraki, who in 2010 wanted to show you that there was there was no development, there was no reform in society, and there was a fossilization of education in Morocco. And I think this applies across the Arab world, where you have the constitution, the history books, and the Islamic study books have been fossilized in concrete. They haven't changed for many decades. They might as well been written in stone. Very political work by Mohsen Harraki. Ja'far Khaldi depicting one of the several Israeli attacks on Gaza in 2009. This was a school. The students were under attack by the Israeli forces. So this is an individual, this is an artist called Sharif Waqid, who created this video that's very controversial. When you look at this work, a man is wearing a balaclava. There's a machine gun in front of him. He's reading from a book. He looks like he's military. There's a flag behind him. First word that comes to your mind now. What? Daesh, terrorist. Okay, so, but in reality, if you only give the person a chance, you'll be able to hear what he's reading from. So, in fact, what the individual, the suicide bomber, is doing is reading from 1001 Arabian Nights. And I'm not sure if you know the story of 1001 Arabian Nights. So the story is obviously Shahrazad, who didn't want to die. She came up with this ingenious plan to tell Shahriyar a story but never finish it. So, and then she would tell him, I'm so tired, I want to go and sleep now. I'll finish the story the next day. And so she was able to prolong her life by 1001 nights. And just like Shahrazad, Sharif Waqid says that these individuals also don't want to die. They want to live another day. So I'm going to show you a quick video of this. Actually, we showed this work in Singapore in 2013. The exhibition ran for three months or so. And 2 weeks before the end of the exhibition, the Islamic Fatwa Institution or Society in Singapore issued a statement for people not to visit the exhibition because it shows this work. They in fact didn't understand the work. It's not to judge. The work is to listen And that was the best thing that happened to the exhibition because a lot of people visited. So I'm going to show you just a few seconds of this video. He's just reading from the book. Okay, so, so I want to show you the depiction of contemporary events in the past few years. You have this work by Paris-based Lebanese artist Ali Sharri called I Carry My Flame. So this work, obviously created in 2011, references the self-immolation of Bouazizi in Tunis. This is not a video of Bouazizi. This is a video he found on YouTube that he took stills from. Bouazizi was not filmed, of course. The work is called I Carry My Flame. But what's interesting about this work is the process in which he created the work. It's called serigraphy. And you have to force ink through paper. It's almost violent in nature, referencing the self-immolation, the burning of the skin. This work by Shadi Zaghzouk, Palestinian artist based in Paris, references the protesters of the Arab Spring in 2011. The work is called Rock Me All Night Long. And it shows you here these protesters, and they have Gaddafi over there. You know, it was also shown in Dismaland, if you visited the show here in the UK last year. Ali Sharri, again, depicting the tension that was that is sort of stored underground in some Arab capitals and Middle Eastern cities, such as this one in Algeria. It's 2014. He says we've not seen the end of it yet. There's a lot of frustration in people, and that's why he calls this work Trembling Landscapes. This is a work by Egyptian artist Rida Abdurrahman, which he painted in 2012, where you had the elections taking place in Egypt. The work basically is calling upon Egyptians not to vote for the Islamists and not to vote for the military, to choose a third way. It's a giant red X here. He took the work to Tahrir Square. A lot of activists in Egypt signed this paper. This is a close-up with a lot of slogans. This artwork almost became a document of history because of the people who signed it and because of the slogans some of you might recognize that appeared. This is a work by Berlin-based Syrian artist called Sulafa Hijazi. So this work was created 2011 during the events of the Arab Spring, where she's showing you, of course, she's referencing or using the fable of Rapunzel, which is a German fable. I'm sure you're familiar with it. But rather than the princess putting her hair out and Prince Charming climbing the tower, what you have is a Salafi sheikh putting his beard out, and you have the militant climbing the beard. So it's almost saying that these preachers are helping the rise or assisting the rise of these militants. This is another work by Sulafa Hijazi, which I couldn't show in the Gulf, so I'm very happy to show it here. Okay, so this work is called Masturbation. I can't believe I said that word on stage. This work is from 2011, again by Sulafa Hijazi, depicting what she might have been talking about Syrian soldiers or any soldiers in the Arab world who almost, they get sexually aroused when they see protesters because they can go and shoot their load. It's almost raw and animalistic in a way. Very, very controversial works, but also very intelligent by this artist. Fadi Hamwi showing you in 2013 that it really isn't the suicide bombers, it's the brain that's going to explode by some people in the region. This is an interesting work by Saudi artist Abdel Nasser Gharam called No More Tears, 2009. So in this work, Abdel Nasser Gharam took stickers from the Johnson & Johnson product, the shampoo, and put it on trouble spots of the Arab world. So, so you can see here 2009, okay? You see, of course, Palestine in red. You see Iraq, South Sudan, Somalia. You know, it's a sad reality. There's a lot of sadness in the Arab world. This is 2009. He revisits this work in 2014. Do you want to guess what happens with the Johnson & Johnson stickers? Okay, so look at this. So you see, contrary to other parts of the world, rather than the lessening of sadness and trouble spots. You see new trouble spots. You see Tunisia, you see Yemen, you see Syria, you see Libya and elsewhere, and Bahrain and elsewhere in the Arab world. And really, it's almost mocking the idea of لا دموع بعد اليوم, there's no more tears, my son, my daughter. Graffiti and street art made a major, I think, emergence in the events of the Arab Spring. This is not to say that there was no graffiti pre-2000, but the fact is that there was no photography that could capture and for it to be shared across social media. These works are no longer there. Some of them lasted for a year, and some of them lasted for a night. It depends on how offensive they were. So this is probably the most famous graffiti street in the Arab world, Muhammad Mahmoud, outside the American University of Cairo in downtown area. So you had the depiction of corrupt leaders, but also of martyrs of the revolution, in a way taking this art to the street. Art is no longer restricted to the elites who can visit galleries and visit museums, but now people in the street are subjected and interact with these artworks. And there's a daily reminder. Notice the banners here on the side depicting that these are martyrs and that they have passed away. This is a work that certainly wouldn't have lasted more than a few hours. It was created by an Egyptian graffiti artist called El Zift. I can't say what I want to say now, but because I want to protect his identity. So El Zift is very smart. He went with a group of activists and artists to the former headquarters of the National Democratic Party, the NDP. This work was created 5 or 6 days before the Egyptian elections of the summer of 2012. If you remember those days, there was a lot of political, it was the climax of politics in Egypt, I believe. So he went there, and a lot of businessmen had come back into the media, a lot of businessmen associated with the Mubarak government. And so what they're saying here is that contrary to the news that this was going to be demolished, because it was burned down during the revolution, in fact, it is opening soon. Within a few hours, the Egyptian government had painted over it, and the work wouldn't have been seen. But the fact is, because of social media, a lot of people photographed it. This is a photograph by Jonathan Rashad, Egyptian photographer. A lot of people photographed this work, and this work basically lives on forever, even though it's graffiti. So there's 2 reasons for me to put up this work. In one way, I'm inviting you to our forum on Saturday at the Whitechapel Gallery. But at the same time, this is a work created by the GCC Collective, which is mostly Kuwaiti artists depicting the GCC Collective, the leaders of the Gulf. But what's interesting about it is that it's a very small work that is placed on a table, and you are looking down on them, but you're also scrutinizing them, which is something that doesn't really happen in reality, that the audience is able to scrutinize the leaders of these Gulf countries. So I will end with this work by Muna Hatoum. Again, Muna Hatoum, a very important artist based here in London. Muna Hatoum didn't do too many works about the Arab world, but I'm afraid that even without her saying this is a work about the Arab world, it's called Infinity, that she created over a period of 10 years. The work depicts perpetual violence, perpetual war, unending, continuous war. You see this symbol of infinity going on forever, the battles that never end. But you also see these toy soldiers. She's almost saying that these people who go off to war are figurines that can be picked up and placed depending, at the whim of those in power. But she's also domesticated the piece. The piece is created in bronze, but it's created on a domestic item, on a coffee table in the house. And the idea is that these wars, contrary to your beliefs, they affect your house. They come back home, even if you think they're far away. They affect your homeland. I will end with this work. Thank you very much.
Well, I think you'll agree that was nothing short of superb, both a tour de force but also a tour de horizon of Arab art across a great many years. So Sultan's kindly agreed to take questioning. We have probably 3/4 of an hour. There are microphones both up in the balcony and here. If you stick your hand up in the usual fashion, I'll recognize you, the mic will come to you if you say who you are and then ask a question and don't deliver a statement. We've already had one lecture. What we want is questions and dialogue between the floor and the speaker. Right, who wants to? Yes, you, sir.
Thank you very much. Could you just say, you did mention it, this forum on the 22nd. Could you just say a little bit what it might be so I might attend? If you could tell me a little bit about that you are meeting on the 22nd, this Saturday, the Whitechapel Gallery. Could you tell me a little bit about what it's going to be about?
Yes, so it's on the Whitechapel website for more information, but I can tell you that it's the closing event of our year-long exhibition in London with the Whitechapel Gallery. They've taken about 100 works from the Barjeel collection in Sharjah, UAE. The exhibition rotated, so every 4 months there were a different set of works. This is the final exhibition. The forum celebrates the closing of the year-long exhibition. There will be a lot of speakers from across the Arab world and Europe as well. And I will be interviewing a very important collector called Dr. Ramzi Dalloul, who has upwards of 3,000 artworks. He owns some of the works that I've shown here. I will be interviewing him about his policy of collection and some political art as well. There is a special price for academics, I think, and people above 60.
You'll have to go on the website to find out. We have a question right at the back there, the gentleman in the suit.
Al Hamaziya, St. Anthony's, Oxford and Surrey. Thank you, Sultan, for the brilliant presentation. I was hoping not to give you the difficult questions. I was hoping you could say a little bit about developments in censorship in the region with respect to politics and art and how social media is changing things on that front. And also a little bit on the role of the Gulf moving forward, seeing as this is under the banner of the Kuwait program, how the Gulf is sort of changing the artistic paradigm from Rabat to Muscat, if you like. Thank you.
So the question was about censorship?
There were two questions. One was the role of across the Middle East of censorship in art, and then the second question was about the role that the Gulf artists have played in driving the boundaries of art forward.
So to answer your first question, censorship, I think, has increased in the Arab world, but so have the ways of circumventing the censorship. So a lot of governments won't allow artists to create work within the political work and works that they would deem to be unacceptable. But what these artists do is they create the work internationally, sell it internationally. The artwork never physically appears in these countries, and so they're able to circumvent it. Once we bought an artwork from Egypt by Mu'taz Nasser. I don't know if I should have said his name or not, but anyway, the artwork is الشعب يريد إسقاط النظام. The people want the downfall of the regime, and so the gallery in Cairo refused to ship it to the Gulf. They said, no, I'll get in trouble. I won't be allowed into the Gulf if I ship an artwork called "The People Want the Downfall of the Regime," because their name would be, on the parcel. So it was a light box made up of four words. الشعب يريد إسقاط النظام. And so what we did to circumvent this fear or reluctance to send it is to ship it in 4 different boxes. So one box was the people, one box was they want, one box was regime, and so the work finally made it to the Gulf. So there's censorship, but you find ways around it. Your second question was the Gulf. I think the Gulf plays an interesting role in the emergence of an Arab art scene. There's obviously the financial factor. There's a lot of money that's pouring in from the Gulf. There's the art fairs in Abu Dhabi and Dubai. There's the Qatar Museum. There's Sharjah Biennial, which has been going for 20 years now. And they've been supporting a lot of artists from the region. But also, there could be an argument to say that some artists might change their work to satisfy the collectors from the Gulf. I don't think any artist would say that, but there might be some artists who do this. At the same time, artists within the Gulf have been creating a lot of cutting-edge art. I mean, we have Manar al-Dawayan here in the audience, one of the most cutting-edge artists from the Gulf, who I think is on par with any international artist, not just from the Arab world. So it's not fair to say that there's only censorship coming or only works that are satisfying Gulf buyers, but this is the reality. The money is coming from the Gulf, so I wonder if it influences the production of art or not.
Thank you. Yes, you, sir, in the white shirt.
Thank you. I have two questions. The first, did you find an art productions telling about the relationship among civil society in Arab, like Sunni and Shi'i, for example? And the second, did you find the artwork criticizing about the relationship between Arab and the West?
Is there artworks that depict the sort of sectarianism in the Arab world and the relationship with the West? Fortunately, the vast majority of artists are enlightened people, and they, fortunately, and unlike some politicians and some religious leaders and some writers, and I can go on and on, but most artists really depict their countries in sort of a unified state. So I can't think really of artists who would choose to depict Sunni or Shia or one religion, Christians or not. That said, of course, sometimes victims come from these communities, and you see a lot of artists depicting the struggle of these societies. For example, Ziya Azzawi, an Iraqi artist who was sent to fight against Kurds in the 1970s, when he went back to Baghdad after the war, created artworks that depicted Kurds. So he said, I felt, he said in an interview, I felt as though I was fighting against my own family. So this is just an example of artists who really depict a unified vision of society. Your second question was vis-a-vis the West. Yes, plenty of criticism towards the West. I'm happy to say that. Especially in the 1950s and 60s, there's less so now, I think, because we have a lot of problems inside the Arab world. So you have many artists are occupied or preoccupied with depicting issues like terrorism in these countries, as you saw. But definitely the West gets its fair share and well-deserved share of criticism from Arab artists.
Thank you. Yes, you, sir, in the check shirt, and then you next.
Thank you, Sultan, for your illuminating talk. My question was in regards to the latter half of your presentation, where a lot of the artwork that you're displaying was produced in the diaspora. And I noticed, I was expecting you to tell us a little bit more about the art that's produced in the diaspora and the impact that it has, and maybe there's a counterfactual here, whether or not such powerful art could have been produced at home.
So that's a very good point, actually. Thank you. I did have it in my mind. Unfortunately, a lot of artists had to leave Iraq following the 2003 invasion. A lot of artists had to leave Syria following the 2011 events. These artists had to move. Some of them moved to Arab countries. Some of them moved to Lebanon. Some moved to Egypt. Some moved to the Gulf countries. I tend to believe that they stayed home because I'm sort of a pan-Arabist. I feel that they're still in their countries. They're still in the Arab world. But and also the fact is that there's still censorship in these countries in the Arab world. But maybe to say something about the artists who went to the West. Obviously, there's much less censorship, but they found their societies. So the ones who came to London and Paris and Berlin, they were able to communicate with other artists. They were not secluded from the Arab world. Many of them continue to depict the Arab world. Many of them still have families who live in these countries. But definitely we have seen an equal phenomenon to the brain drain. We have seen an artist drain in countries like Iraq, for example. There are still many artists, but many artists have since left. Some of the greatest Iraqi artists, unfortunately, for me at least, live in Europe and live in North America. But I do believe they will go back. We've seen this happen with other countries, and artists do end up going back to their countries. Yes.
Thank you so much for that talk. I was wondering, you spoke a lot about how art reflects or documents politics and historical change, and I was wondering if you thought that Arab art did or can affect political change, so not just as a reflection, but also as making change happen in politics.
So I showed you the works by Walid Abeid, showing you the man who's being tortured, the long bread lines, and there are other artists who did the same. Artists generally don't go into politics, and all they can do, I think, is influence politicians, influence intellectuals, or they might have been even influenced by intellectuals. There were few artists who became ministers of culture in the Arab world, but we saw that they were rather than them influencing the politics, they were themselves influenced by the politics. So it's like the political animal in the Arab world has the power to change the individual, and to change them not always to the better, change them into an actor for the government. But I do believe that artists have a very important role to play. But can they affect political change? It's very difficult. If you think of Egypt, for example, 2011, by 2010, there were stencils created in the image of Khalid Said, the Egyptian who was killed by the security forces in Alexandria. Did that influence the uprising in Egypt? I'm not sure, but perhaps it did influence some of the activists then.
Okay, thanks. There's two questions, or three questions up there. First you, and then you, and then you.
Thank you. So I'd like to come back for a second to the question that was raised earlier regarding the influence between Arab artists and what is happening with regard to Western engagement in the region. Now you were saying that nowadays artists are really too concerned with what is going on in their respective countries, but I've recently completed a PhD on Western engagement in Libya, and what we're seeing today in Libya is clearly also a consequence of Western engagement there. Thus, I'm wondering, are you aware of any artworks that deal with sort of what is happening in that region with regard to Western engagement right now? Thank you.
Just to repeat the question, am I aware of any artists who are depicting events in Libya?
Whether it's Libya or Syria, I mean in the region, because it is not that everything that all the problems that are in the region, happening in the region right now, are solely, regional problems.
Yes.
There's a foreign element to it as well. Thank you.
So yes, there's a number of, you're talking about Western intervention. Yeah. Yes. So as you saw, for example, with Huda Lutfi, democracy is coming, sort of showing you the promise of democracy coming from the West, but on military tanks. There are definitely many artists. I can't think of names right away, but there's many artists who also depicted Western intervention in the Arab world. If you want to contact me, and I'll put you in touch with them.
Yes, sir. You at the back.
Firstly, thank you for the enlightening presentation. It was great going through some of the artworks that celebrate or commemorate the successes of the modern Arab world and some of the failures and tragedies. I couldn't help notice that there aren't any artworks that depict or criticize, for that matter, what's happening in Syria currently. So what do you in your view, what is the reason of that? Is it fear of retribution, censorship, or are artists kind of wanting to wait to see what's happening in Syria first to maybe base a judgment?
In fact, many artists depict events in Syria. I showed a number of artists like Fadi Hamwi, Sulafa Hijazi, you have Tamam Azzam, you have honestly, there's so many photographers, artists, It's very difficult to create works that are very critical, especially if artists have families in these countries. Many of these artists' families still live in Damascus, so you have to keep that in mind when you create art about the regime. But it's also the case that I am not knowledgeable, about every single artist and every single, artwork that's created about Syria. I can research for you. I know there are experts like Rafia Qudmani, who has put up a number of exhibitions, and Fadi Salim, who put up a number of exhibitions. All these works are about Syrian artists depicting the war, the work. So you can look them up.
This is a question down the front. Yes, right down at the front.
Hi, thanks for a brilliant presentation. And I thought the part with Gamal Abdel Nasser's pictures was especially interesting because we have some family relatives who grew up at that time, and one of them was like, let me show you the portraits I drew when I was a child, and every single one of them was just these very, very big portraits of Gamal Abdel Nasser. My question is about, and slightly related to the question on kind of the role of art in causing political change, because a lot of art does have a message, but tends to be a very subtle message, and probably due to censorship. But what's your personal opinion on kind of whether being subtle or being direct is more effective, and also on in general, if being forced to be allegorical and symbolic kind of makes the idea of being symbolic lose its beauty in a way? Just in kind of from an artistic perspective.
So some of the most powerful and important artworks from the Arab world were allegorical, were artworks that did not specifically show the dictator sort of killing citizens, or being overt. Most of them were very subtle, covert, like the Kazim Haidar that I showed you. Works that depicted suppression or political assassinations, but because these artists wanted to sell their works and they wanted to continue living in these countries, they had to be very subtle. But you notice that they're also some of the smartest artworks. If you think this is something that is employed by other artists around the world, think of Picasso's Guernica, which depicted a major event, but didn't have the word Guernica in it, didn't have exact symbolism of that city in Spain. Artists in the Arab world did something very similar to that. Is it better to be overt? I think that is the role of maybe other intellectuals, like maybe writers and maybe politicians. But poets and painters and artists have tried to be closer to the people. They try not to speak down or give orders. They try to depict to the common man and the common woman their feelings and vice versa. So, in fact, as a person interested in art from the Arab world, I see the smarter works are the ones, even in contemporary artworks, that depict events and make political statements, but are subtle rather than are too direct.
Yes. You with the white top on. Put your hand up and the mic will come to you.
Thank
you. Thank you, Sultan, for your presentation. My name is Zad Sleiman. I'm from Lebanon. I wanted to ask you about how common are the artwork on Arab world done by non-Arabs, and would you consider these work as Arab art? And I'm referring here to Bansky graffiti, especially.
So art that was created in the Arab world?
Like by non-Arabs, by foreigners.
Well, so really it's the definition. Let's go back to Banksy going into Palestine, creating a work over a period of a few days is not really an Arab work. It's a work of art in the Arab world. The notion of what is an Arab artwork is also a troublesome notion, because a lot of artists like Can Davidessian, Paul Gregosian, Ervan Demirjian are Armenian artists. They happen to be Lebanese and Egyptian, for example. Kevork Morad and others are Armenian. Some artists were Kurdish, other artists were Amazigh, Berber, some artists were Persian, who ethnically Persian. But if they lived, I mean, for me, they lived a long time in the Arab world, they speak the language. For me, they're Arab artists, but you have to also respect their ethnic identity as well. You have to keep that in mind. It's part and parcel of their identity, whether they were Jewish, whether they were Amazigh. This is all part of their identity. So I don't consider these to be Arab artworks, but artworks that were created in solidarity, maybe with the Arab world. Having said that, a lot of artists moved to the Arab world, spent many decades. Perhaps they were born outside the Arab world, but because they lived there for so long, I consider them to be Arab. This includes Lorna Salim, for example, born in Wales, but lived for over half a century in Iraq. You know, what more can she do? She's lived there for so long. She's married an Iraqi, started an Iraqi family. Ervan Demirjian, born in Turkey, moved to Egypt. Again, he's an Egyptian artist. So you have to keep that in mind. I think it's more nuanced.
Right, yes. Just hand the mic next. Oh, no, is it gone? Oh. Yes, the woman in the black top with the scarf, thanks.
Hi, Noor. So my question is, so this summer I went to the Sigzout Museum in Beirut. I don't know if you're familiar with it. And when I entered, I realized that a lot of the artwork that was put forth in the 60s was non-political in the sense, I mean, everything is political, but in the sense that it depicted issues not related to direct confrontational politics. And I was thinking, you know, ever since 67, there's a lot of reductionist statements that state that Arab art is purely political. So your interest in art, have you realized there's a trend in contemporary art to move away from the typical political kind of art?
So that's actually a great question. It's a point I wanted to make and I forgot about during the talk. So even abstract art in the Arab world had a political undertone to it. It is work that rejected the Western school of art. It is work that was almost depicted the identity of the country, the identity of the artist. It is not a landscape. It is not a palm tree. It is not a Bedouin. It is not what the Western Orientalists expected the Arab artists to depict from their own societies. And many of these abstract works that you saw were created in these fine arts schools, whether it was the school of Casablanca, the school of Khartoum, the school of Baghdad, the school of Kuwait. All these schools put forth a new national identity. And it was a reaction against the Western imperialism or Western influence that we are forming our own identity. If you see in Iraq all these sort of circular heads that artists created. If you see the school of Casablanca, you see a lot of sort of works that were influenced by Harufism, by calligraphy or letterism, but are not letterism. These are works that were almost unique to Morocco, works unique to Tunis, works unique to Baghdad. So these abstract works are also an allegory, they are also a political statement.
Right, yes, sir.
Thank you for an illuminating lecture, Sultan. I wanted your thoughts on the building and establishment of art schools and academies, because there is a consensus or a view that art should be organic. However, given the situation in the Arab world, it would be helpful to set up and encourage, you know, hubs and incubators to teach art and artistic technique. And touching on that point, I was very impressed by the Sirkal Avenue in Dubai, which has attracted so much artistic talent out of nowhere, you know, unused warehouse space. Do you think that should be actively encouraged, or should art be organic?
So the first question was about establishment of artistic schools. So the first school in the Arab world was established for an Egyptian prince who wanted to learn Yusuf Kamel, I believe. And that was maybe in the early 20th century. And that school graduated a lot of the artists that we recognize today. We saw Raqib Ayad, Yusuf Kamel, and others. So there is a case for artistic schools. There aren't enough, perhaps, artistic schools. But today, art really is not confined to a classroom. artists they don't need to go to school to learn how to paint, to learn how to take photographs, to learn how to do sculpting. I'm a big fan of having art schools. We have an art school in Sharjah. There are art schools. There's an art school in Doha. I spoke at VCU. There's in Egypt still, in Beirut still. There's a lot of art schools. So yes, of course, the more art schools, the better. But it's not really confined to if you have art schools, then you have good art. Egyptians made good art before art schools were created. The consensus seems to say that. And the second question is Sirkal Avenue. Those of you who don't know what Sirkal is, a merchant family from Dubai called Sirkal had built a warehouse compound that they converted about maybe 10 years ago into an art district. And it's interesting because it's almost an equalizer where you have people driving up in their Bentleys and Mercedes, BMW, and you also have, because it's an industrial area, you have construction workers, blue-collar workers who wander around. So it's one of the only places in Dubai where you see these very rich people walking next to construction workers, and it's a beautiful sight, and it's one of the only places in the UAE that you see this coming together of different stratas of society. So should art be organic? I think every country has a different take on this. In Beirut, I can't imagine someone doing a Sirkal Avenue in Beirut or in Cairo. Art basically exists throughout the cities in Cairo and in Beirut and elsewhere. In Baghdad, unfortunately, the art is being created outside, although a lot of artists are still resisting and doing art inside Baghdad. But I think what's nice about Sirkal Avenue is it's not just Arab artists, it's artists from India, from Iran, from Europe, from Africa. So you see people from all over the world.
Right. Yes. Let's take the question at the back, the lady with the stripy top and the red scarf.
Hi there, thanks for your talk. I'm a third-year student of international relations here at LSE, and I was just really interested when you touched upon the fossilization of the education systems in some Arab states. And I just wanted to know if you think that art can change that and lead to more progressive attitudes, despite the fact that censorship might still be an issue with certain governments or regimes.
If you asked me this question 5 years ago, I'd tell you yes. But unfortunately, what we've seen in the last 5 years since the beginning of the Arab Spring, we've seen a resurgence of hyper-nationalism. We've seen a resurgence in hyper-Islamism. We've seen a resurgence in worrying trends that I thought were going to be tempered by liberal ideas, by art, by culture, but that hasn't happened. So I'm still hopeful, but I think the answer now is a tentative no.
But your lecture in focusing on contemporary art that is still thriving in the Middle East between these two hypers of nationalism and Islamism, surely that indicates there's still a space for cosmopolitan creative liberalism in the form of art.
There certainly is. There's a lot of people. You go to Egypt, you go to the UAE, you go to countries across the region. A lot of people still enjoy this art. They still visit. How much influence do they have? How much influence do the liberals have in Arab countries? It seems to me that the battle is increasingly between Islamists and hyper-nationalists in the Arab world. And liberals' space and space for seculars has been shrinking more and more every year. This is something I see on Twitter, on social media. In the newspapers, it seems the articles are either calling for more hyper-nationalism or more Islamism in society. If you call for more liberal, more secular views, you are in the minority. Forget about leftist and socialist views, because these people have almost been squeezed out of the conversation.
Okay, thank you. On that depressing note, yes, sir, you with the beard.
Hi, thanks, Sultan, for the presentation. We know that Jamal al-Mahamil had wide resonance in the Arab world. It was actually spread by a lot of people wanted to print posters and send it all over the world. But my question is about the resonance of art pieces of that era. How many of them, or could you say that a large number of them resonated with the Arab so-called street, or did they stay in the upper bourgeois elite galleries of Cairo and Beirut?
So that's a great point. Jamal Mahamil is the camel of burdens, the man who was carrying Jerusalem on his back. If you remember that work, that work is probably one of the most recognizable works of Arab art. The reason is the person who bought it printed, I don't know how many, but many posters that went around the world, went to South America, went across the Arab world, went to Europe. It is so famous that taxi drivers recognize it. But they don't know the name. They don't know that it's called the Camel of Burdens. But they know that it's the man who's carrying Jerusalem on his back. I know that work. Everybody knows that work. It's a very famous artwork. And it's a good point that art has, other than the public art that we showed you, the Jawad Salim public work, the work by Mahmoud Mukhtar in Egypt, the work by Isiachem in Algeria, and other artworks, was mostly left to the confines of the elites, the intellectuals who would visit these exhibitions. Then it was up to these intellectuals to disseminate the information. It could have been done through the music, the poetry of Ahmed Fuad Nigam, or the music of Sayyid Badawi, and other musicians, for example. Music was more accessible to the everyday person in the Arab world. The radio was more accessible than the galleries. That is until the advent of graffiti, because public art was generally confined to the government. The government chose what work would be displayed to the public, and they would generally not show you a work that was critical of themselves. So it was the first time that Arabs were subjected to political art that was accessible to the public when graffiti art emerged. But I want to reiterate a point I made during this talk, is that graffiti is basically political writing on the square, including imagery. This is something that happened from Arabi's revolution, maybe from 100 years ago. So these are statements that were written. Even in the Gulf, there was political statements against the British presence, but this was all painted over, and people didn't have access to Instagram then. iPhone wasn't invented, and so people generally didn't have cameras. You know, if you want to take a camera, if you want to take a picture of that writing, the camera was this big, and so you'd attract a lot of attention. And these political slogans were not captured, so we have forgotten them. But we know about them from our families.
Right, in the last 10 minutes, I'm going to take a clutch of 3 questions from the top and 3 questions from the bottom. And those of you who are outraged by not being asked a question, you know you've got another at least half an hour with informal discussion upstairs at the reception. So yes, the first question is the woman there in grey, I think.
Thank you, Sultan, for a very good talk. Noor Kadim, I'm a lawyer international lawyer at Joseph A. Garrison. My question is, to what extent do you think that artists in the Middle East, because maybe this kind of art, contemporary artists today, this kind of art maybe sells, are they put under pressure or encouraged by galleries to create political art? And to what extent is that controlled by the galleries, whether in the Middle East or outside of the Middle East?
So good. Hold that. We're going to group them together so we can get. Yes, yeah, you sir at the back.
Hi. So first of all, thank you for this presentation. My name is Yusuf Darwish. I'm from Egypt, and I have 2 questions. So the first question: what's the role of social media?
Because we'll get more in. Just so the most important question.
Yeah. So my question would be about the ideology. Like 50 years ago, you could see like a common ideology between like the artists, the idea of Qawmiyya al-Arabiyya or the Arabic unity, and under Nasser. Is there some common identity that you can infer from the art right now, or like there's more like Western influence, so it's becoming more ambiguous?
That's a great question. And the final question at the top, the gentleman there, and I guess at the hooded top.
Thank you. A quick one. I think I got the. I'm sorry. I understood that most of the art collectors and funders, most of the finance driving the Arab art right now is coming from the Gulf. How much of that is influencing, for example, inside lining the art criticizing, for example, this intervention in Bahrain or what Saudi Arabia is doing in Yemen, for example, are such kind of arts, do they have place in galleries or do they have place in exhibitions, because most of the money is coming from the Gulf? Thanks.
Excellent, thank you. Now 3 questions down here. Yes, but not you behind you. Yes, thanks.
Hello, I'm a graphic communication student from CSM, and I have a question about typography. It has always been one of the most significant parts of Arab art, but why does it almost disappear in contemporary and modern art?
I'm sorry, I didn't understand the question.
Why has it disappeared?
Yeah.
Okay, we got that. And then you, and then one more over here somewhere. Yes, you, sir, with the white jumper.
Hi. Just a quick question. I would like you to tell us a little bit more about the situation and the role of female artists, and basically the ones working in the Arab world. You talk about Mona Hatoun and some others, but I'm interested about the situation and the role of the ones based in the Arab world, and what's the present in the museums in the Gulf region. And I'm especially asking this question because I didn't know about the event at the Whitechapel Gallery on Saturday, but the Guerrilla Girls are also having an exhibition there right now, so I hope you say something really positive about the situation and the role of the female artists at the moment.
Thank you. And the final question is the gentleman with the white jumper and the grey scarf.
Thanks. Thank you for the talk, Sultan. I wonder, obviously, your talk focused on visual arts. Which medium do you think has the most reach in the Arab world? Because obviously there's still a sort of thriving and very political cinema film scene in Egypt, for instance, and the music of Mashrou al-Layla is very political, that sort of thing. So yeah, I wonder if I could ask you that.
Great. You have 3 questions. I've taken notes and so have you, but the 3 questions, as I understand them from the balcony, are: 1, has the commercialization of art driven the rise in political art, as I understand it? 2, my favorite question of the night, I think, is if a lot of the stuff that you showed from the images from the 1950s and 60s was driven by Arab nationalism, can you identify a different, the same, or similarly powerful identity? And then 3rd, because, as you say, Gulf buyers are buying up a lot of the Arab art, has that stifled criticism of Gulf foreign policy, whether it be in Bahrain or Yemen?
Yeah, great questions. So let's begin with the last question. Certainly, with regards to artworks that are critical of the Gulf, these artists can produce the work, but I would bet that they cannot show these works in the Gulf if they're criticizing directly Gulf leaders. But many artists are smart and they can create works that are subtle. They're criticism, but they're subtle criticism, like the GCC Collective, putting Gulf leaders under the microscope, making the small versions of them where you look, you're sort of bigger, looking down at them. So if you can find a way to get around that, you'll be able to show your work. Maybe this work was displayed in the Gulf, this work was displayed in the US as well. But depicting the war in Yemen, I haven't seen. I'll be very curious to see works depicting the war in Yemen, but I haven't seen many yet. The other question was
on identity?
Yes.
Yeah.
So yes, I like that question. As you said, previously it was Islamism. Previously it was pan-Arabism that artists came together to depict, and then I think it became counter-Islamism. The truth is that this is the $64 million question. Is that the phrase? We don't know what the new ism is in the Arab world. What is the new ism that will drive people away from the hyper-Islamism? I'm not saying driving them away from Islam. Islam is an important religion, but the sort of the Islamism, I think hyper-nationalism is very scary for me, as scary as hyper-Islamism. What is the new ism? We don't know. What are people coming up with? Is it going to be peace? Is it going to be democracy? Someone told me that the new ism of the youth in the Arab world is coding. I know that sounds crazy, but these youngsters, they speak a language that I don't understand. They're half my age, and they all code, and they all communicate online. I don't know what they're coming up with, and I hope it's something positive.
The question up there was about, the final question from the balcony was about the commercialization of art.
So a lot of artists create works that satisfy buyers, and they sell them for money, for a lot of money, so that they can create works that are meaningful to them. So just like any other job, sometimes if you want to be a musician, you have to take a full-time job and do something boring like banking, and then do your music on the side until you sort of have the capability of standing on your feet. And I think this goes to a lot of other jobs. So many artists create work to satisfy galleries until they're able to stand on their feet and produce works that they feel can depict their beliefs.
Now, the three questions from the floor here. What accounts for the decline of calligraphy in modern Arab art? Or do you agree that calligraphy has declined in modern Arab art?
So we just published a book. I think the question came from over here. Yeah. We just published a book by Dr. Sharbel Daghar, a professor from Lebanon, Sharbel Daghar, called Arabic Hurufiyya, Art and Identity. So this book is out of print. It's 30 years old. We just published it in English. It's coming out 15th of October, so just a few days ago it's come out, about the rise of Hurufism. I don't believe that calligraphy or Hurufism has disappeared. A lot of the most famous graffiti artists today use calligraphy. You can think of El-Cid, you can think of Zafir, and many other artists who use calligraphy. Aya Tariq. I don't want to just use male names from Egypt, but Aya Tariq is another very important female artist who uses also calligraphy in her work. So it hasn't died. I like to see sort of a coming together of calligraphy and figurative and abstract, but calligraphy artists are doing very well. And a lot of their work is very political. As I told you, that work titled The People Won the Fall of the Regime was contemporary calligraphy. It's a calligraphic work that was created using a light box. But it is calligraphy nonetheless.
But here is the question that you're being asked about the role of women artists in the Middle East, and you're being asked if you can say something positive about it.
Oh, it's very positive. I think female artists have played a very important role in the modern era, whether it's Affat Naji, Inji Aflatun, in Egypt, whether you look at Sami Halabi in Palestine. Today, coming up, I think in a few weeks, you have a retrospective of a Sudanese female artist called Kamala Ishaq Ibrahim, who was active in the 1960s and 70s. The retrospective is in Sharjah. Sharjah has also put together a retrospective of Fakhr Nisa Zaid, who was Jordanian. She was obviously Turkish by birth, but she was very much Iraqi and Jordanian by identity. So I think female artists play a very important role. The fact that they haven't been highlighted, I think, says more about who writes and who controls the media, who controls the scholarship. In general, it isn't women. So I think that women artists deserve a greater deal of scholarship and exhibitions. But we have seen a lot of women artists finally getting the recognition that they deserve.
And the final question, and we have to be quick because we're just out of time, but you can answer this in one word, I think. Which is the most influential, the most popular medium for art? And it was suggested it might actually be music or film and not figurative, not...
So obviously, I agree with the person who asked the question. Cinema is very influential. You have a lot of political movies that have come out from the 1960s and 70s, Yusuf Shaheen's movies. You have a few Egyptian movies that have come out recently by Mohammed Diab, by Amra Salama. You have a Syrian artist, a Syrian movie called, I think, Al Hudud or The Frontier, that came out in the 1980s, I believe. So film is very accessible to people. All these movies are available now on YouTube, not always legally, but people can see them. I think music perhaps is the most influential medium when it comes to art. Poetry, as you saw Mahmoud Darwish's poetry being used by artists like Ziya Azzawi and many other artists. Today, the most influential, I think, for contemporary artists is social media. A lot of artists are creating works on Instagram. It's being shared, it's being viewed tens of thousands of times, and it's very accessible. You don't need to travel to see the work. Sulafa Hijazi's work, you know, the work I showed you with the man climbing, you know, the tower using a beard. That work I don't think was ever shown publicly, but it was sold because she showed it on social media. So artists are using social media, and I wouldn't discount the role of paintings. Paintings are still very important and highly sought after.
Right, I think that leaves me with 4 things to say before we break up. Firstly, I apologize to everyone who didn't get a question in. I think it's tantamount, it's indicative of the hugely interesting and evocative lecture that we've been given and the images. But you can, if you go up to the senior dining room, you can then engage Sultan in an informal way at the drinks reception. That's the second thing I need to do. To remind you that as you walk out, if you're old like me, you can get a lift up to the senior dining room. If you're young and fit, you can take the stairs, which will get you there quicker. And then I think thirdly, you've seen the lecture, you've heard the lecture, you've seen the slides, and you now have a few days left to go and see the exhibition at the Whitechapel Gallery.
The exhibition lasts until January.
It does. Oh, no, the exhibition. So I was going to rush you all there, but you've got till January. But there is indeed a colloquium on the exhibition on Saturday that you could also go to for a minimal fee. We've discussed that, entry fee. But I think the most important thing is to thank our speaker for a superb lecture that's, I think, been brilliant.
Thank you. Thank you.